What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of the GrowingAU Show, where we go over the stock market's winners and losers to help you find and determine the best place to put your money in the stock market. Because after all, the best way to have your money work for you is to know how your money works. This week's episode is kind of a part 2 to last week's episode, where we went over Tesla's new and possibly biggest competitor, Nikola. Nikola Motors is a stock that is going to be coming on the market very soon, going through a joint merger with VectoIQ. We talked about that merger and how VectoIQ stock is surging in the last episode. If you're interested in that, go check it out. But this week's episode is actually spawning from a comment by Peter, so let's thank Peter for this week's episode that he left on that video. As many of you know, the point of the GrowingAU Show is to give you some of the basic numbers and data and analytical information to allow you to determine whether or not a certain stock or asset is something that you as an investor want to do further research in to decide whether or not you want to invest. And as you know, in our stock guide sheets that are linked below and through our email list, we provide you with all the links and necessary material to find that information. Well, Peter left a comment on last week's episode talking about how he wanted to have a little bit more information provided than what was actually given in that episode. He wanted us to dive a little bit deeper into Nikola stock, and that's what we're going to be doing today. You can see his comment there, and we're going to be going through some of those questions that he asked in that comment today to give you a better idea of what Tesla's new competitor really means for the electric motor company and whether Elon Musk needs to be worried. We're going to be going through it today, and finally, at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you whether or not I think Nikola Motors is a place that you should be investing in when it comes to the electric car market. So we're going to be going over all of that today, right after the intro. This is GrowingAU. So I have to say really quickly, guys, if you are enjoying the GrowingAU Show, if you're super hyped for this episode, make sure you smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss awesome future episodes like this one that lets you know where you need to be getting into in the stock market. So let's jump into some of these questions that Peter asked in last week's episode. So the first thing that we need to do today is talk about exactly what Nikola Motors is. So Nikola Motors is a company that is going to be specializing in Class 8 trucking vehicles. All right, that's like your classic semi-truck. And what they want to be doing is they're going to be producing two classes of vehicles, one battery powered and then a future class of hydrogen powered vehicles. Now, Nikola Motors started out as a solely hydrogen powered company, producing sport powered vehicles as well as the Class 8 trucks. But then what happened is they got into a little scuffle with Tesla once Tesla released their new Class 8 battery powered truck that caused Nikola Motors to not only sue Tesla, but to kind of revamp their strategy, saying that now we're going to release battery powered trucks in 2021 and then we're going to release our new hydrogen truck in 2023. So a little bit of change up there from Nikola's initial claims, but right now what they're doing is they're producing the battery powered trucks and the hydrogen powered trucks in the future. So that is what Nikola is doing. That's the kind of company they are. Let's take a look at the leader of Nikola. CEO of Nikola Motors, kind of a serial entrepreneur, Trevor Milton, has actually had a couple companies under his belt in the past. The first company that Trevor Milton was established with was a actually 80 million user online e-commerce platform that was in direct competition with Amazon. Now, it's claimed that that platform went under due to simple lack of funding. But now that Trevor Milton had his foot in the door of entrepreneurship, he didn't want to stop there. He went and became the CEO of a company called D-Hybrid, which was a natural gas company that was later acquired due to a lawsuit by Worthington Industries. Now, the company had to sell itself to Worthington at very low prices due to the fact that after the lawsuit, the company just could not sustain itself. The point of the matter is he had that e-commerce store, the natural gas company, and then went on to found Nikola Motors. Now, in addition to everything we said before, Nikola Motors is a Arizona-based company currently valued at $3.3 billion with a $10 opening share price. Now, later in the video, we're going to be talking about how the market is actually valuing Nikola at a far higher price than $3.3 billion. And we're going to be talking about whether that is a super overinflated valuation by the market later on in the video. So more on that to come. But as of right now, Nikola, Trevor Milton, they have actually no trucks out on the road. They do have a few prototype models, and we're going to get into what those models are in just a second. But something that has majorly just happened for Nikola we want to talk about is actually Anheuser-Busch had just pre-ordered 800 trucks for their fleet in 2021. So a major pre-order there by Anheuser-Busch. And you might be wondering, well, how many pre-orders for their trucks currently exist? Well, the current number of pre-orders for these trucks are at 14,000, giving them $10 billion in possible future revenue. Now, there's some other problems with the pre-order that we're going to be discussing later on. But before we do any of that and to start discussing the problems, there's a couple more things that we need to know. So what are the truck models? Well, there are 3 Class 8 trucks that Nikola is currently set to produce. Nikola 1, Nikola 2, and Nikola Tree. Now it's TRE, so I don't know if that's tree or it's supposed to be 3 or how it's pronounced, but it's TRE. You'll see them all here on the screen. So Nikola 1, Nikola 2, and Nikola Tree. The Nikola 1 is currently set at $350,000. And also on top of the Class 8 trucks, they're also producing the Nikola Badger, which is a super awesome looking pickup truck currently valued at $60,000 to $90,000. And that's one set to be both battery and hydrogen powered at any given time. As we talked about in the last video, the Nikola Badger isn't actually going to get produced until they can get with an auto manufacturer to partner with to actually get that truck into production. So a little bit of a backlog there, but that is a set model to release in the future. So the Nikola 1 costing $350,000, the Nikola Badger civilian use $60,000 to $90,000. But the one thing that Nikola is really proud of is they've developed a new pricing system for their trucks. So I'm going to read it for you here today. So Nikola also claims to have built a new leasing system, as we said. The total cost of the truck will be about 90 cents per mile over a 7-year lease. And the other great part is that the fees of that lease and all of the service fees will all be covered within the payment agreement. And the other thing we want to talk about is that Nikola says that that is pretty much on par with diesel costs. So there's going to be no extraneous costs to be switching to these battery powered or hydrogen powered trucks in the future. That you're not going to be saving any money by simply staying with diesel. But the one thing you might be thinking, and rightfully so, is if we're going to be switching away from diesel, how are we going to start to fuel these hydrogen trucks? And really that's a great question because I don't drive around seeing a whole lot of hydrogen fuel stations. So what is the plan? Well, if you're going to disrupt the market, you have to build disruptive infrastructure. And that is what Nikola plans to do. They plan on releasing a whole large array of hydrogen fueling stations across the country. And a couple metrics here. So a hydrogen fueling station by Nikola is going to be able to produce 8 tons of hydrogen fuel per day, which is enough to supply 150 vehicles. And truck-focused depots can produce even more than that, bringing the hydrogen costs down. Nikola claims that their first station will be set up in 2021, with a total of 700 stations set up by 2022. These Nikola truck depots are going to be about the size of a regular truck stop, just a little over 10 acres, and they're going to be set to fuel this entire new fleet of hydrogen trucks that's going to be hitting the North American and US streets. Now, 700 fueling stations by 2022 is one thing, but how many of them actually currently exist? Well, in 2018, there were 337 hydrogen fueling stations worldwide, and by 2033, they expect there to be 3,000 hydrogen fueling stations worldwide. And actually, here's a map of all the US stations that Nikola proposes to get set up by 2022. But why would you want to switch? If the pricing is close to that of diesel, why would you want to switch to Nikola's new hydrogen fleet? Well, first of all, the hydrogen fleet will be able to go twice as far as battery-powered trucks, essentially making Tesla's new battery-powered truck obsolete. Secondly, the emissions of the hydrogen trucks is just water, so it's not going to be polluting the air. So any companies that are focused on a green message are going to have an outlet here with Nikola's hydrogen trucks. And also, if we take a look at this graph here, we can see that hydrogen fuel actually comes down to be lower than gasoline. So it actually could be that shipping companies are going to actually save money by switching over to the hydrogen fleet proposed by Nikola. Now, a major thing that has just happened with Nikola is they've actually partnered with an Italian-based C&H Industries and Iveco's and FTP business units. And what they're going to be doing is actually producing the Model Tre, as we talked about earlier, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but they're going to be producing that truck actually in plants already established and built over in Germany. And that truck is going to be battery powered and set to release in 2021. And one of the great parts is that now that they've partnered with these companies that already have infrastructure in place that's going to allow these trucks to be produced on a mass scale, allowing Nikola to actually begin to get some of those products out to their customers and actually start to cash in on that $10 billion future profits by their 14,000 pre-orders. Overall, what that European venture does for Nikola is it actually provides them with some already established infrastructure to begin to produce their product, which is really important. And actually, speaking of infrastructure, it's time that we actually start to discuss some of the problems that are currently existing with Nikola. Now, a lot of these problems, I'm going to give credit to this YouTube video right here that I watched of all the reasons that he's not buying Nikola stock, and he actually brings up some good points, and I want to talk about them here today. So the first problem that we have with Nikola stock, okay, so they're saying that they have $10 billion in pre-orders, right? So if they fill all their $14,000 pre-orders, it'll be a $10 billion of future profit and revenue. Here's the problem. You don't have to pay for a Nikola pre-order. It goes right on their website, right there, $0 for a pre-order. All of you watching this video could go pre-order your Nikola truck right now and not have to put down any money. So how many of those pre-orders are actually going to be fulfilled in the future? Is it just going to be the 800 by Anheuser-Busch, or are the majority of all the pre-orders going to be fulfilled? Is it going to be 80% of 14,000? Is it going to be 70% of 14,000? 10% of 14,000? What's going to happen? And that's something we're going to have to wait and watch in the future. But that's a major problem. If you don't have to pay for the pre-order, then how many of these pre-orders are actually legitimate and actually intending to be fulfilled by the parent companies? The other major problem with Nikola is the fact that they're talking about releasing a new hydrogen fleet to the world, something that has not been done before, and the infrastructure to actually make that possible doesn't exist. Those 700 hydrogen fueling stations that have to be built across the United States do not currently exist, and we're in mid-2020, and they're talking about having those 700 stations up by 2022. And the problem I have with that is that right now Nikola has $500 million in the bank. It's going to cost a lot more than $500 million to build that massive of an infrastructure across the United States. And really, why would any of these trucking companies go and buy Nikola trucks if that infrastructure isn't first put in place? So the amount of money that it's going to take to actually build that infrastructure is going to be exceeding exponentially what Nikola actually has on hand. And speaking of what Nikola has on hand and their money, the market price of Nikola stock through VectoIQ is around $20 right now, putting them at a $6.6 billion valuation. So that's a $6.6 billion valuation for a company that has no product and has no currently existing infrastructure. They're building a disruptive product, and the disruptive infrastructure to support that disruption, that's a lot of disrupting, is not currently in place. And the money they have available to them, that $500 million, is not going to get them very far when it comes to building 700 hydrogen plants across the United States, and never mind the future world. The other major problem that people are having with Nikola stock, and I'm kind of agreeing with it here, is that they're not going through a traditional IPO. They're doing this weird reverse merger with VectoIQ, which leads to the question of why not just go through a traditional IPO. We saw companies like Virgin Galactic go through a merger, and that worked rather well. But the weird part here is that the reverse merger that Nikola is doing is actually raising some questions. It raises questions of, were you not able to get a major venture capitalist to fund you? Were you not able to get investment firms to fund you? And are you simply now just going to go through the public through kind of a backdoor alley because you think the public is more likely to not pay attention and just give you the money? Raises some questions there. Those questions are further compounded by the fact that Trevor Milton, the CEO, or current CEO anyway, of Nikola, is actually going to be handing the CEO position over a man named Mark Russell, who he knew from Worthington Industries. So what that confuses me is your company that you started is about to go public, and you're about to hand over the CEO position before you've even really gotten started. That raises some questions for a lot of people, and rightfully so. So not only do you have no infrastructure, not only are you kind of going through a weird backward channel to publicly trade, and now you're handing over the CEO position. It's kind of weird, and not to mention the fact that they have an uphill battle the size of Denali ahead of them when it comes to actually building the infrastructure and getting this hydrogen fleet out on the market and actually being able to battle with diesel. I think overall right now the problems that are proposed to Nikola stock really do raise some very important questions. And ultimately, I think right now, whether or not I'm going to invest in Nikola stock, or whether or not I'm going to invest in the proxy VectoIQ while I wait for this merger to take place on June 2nd, I'm not really sure right now. I think what we have to be very, very cognizant of is that the fact that Nikola right now is simply a speculative investment. It's whether or not they can actually make these future prospects and these future promises come to fruition. They have a giant uphill battle ahead of them. To build that infrastructure, to get that new hydrogen fleet of trucks out there is no small task. And with only $500 million currently in the bank, that's going to be a very hard battle for Nikola. And like we said right now, $6.6 billion in valuation. They've made no profits. They've made no revenue. They have no trucks currently out in the market. And it costs nothing to make a pre-order. So ultimately, those 14,000 pre-orders don't have a lot of backing behind them. It leads to some really high and hair-raising questions when it comes to whether or not you should invest in Nikola stock. Do I think you should invest in Nikola stock before the merger? I think it's a potential for that stock, the VectoIQ stock, when it switches over to Nikola, to raise dramatically. There is a lot of hype behind it right now. Last I checked, the PE ratio of that stock was something like 300, and we know that when the PE ratio of a stock is high, that also means emotions are running high. So do I think you should buy it? I think if you decide to drop a couple dollars in there, a couple $100 or something like that into that stock, I think it's a very speculative investment. It's possible you can really see some short-term gains, maybe some also incredible long-term gains if Nikola can fulfill some of their promises, but that is to be seen in the future. Right now, I think any sort of money put towards Nikola is very speculative investing. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but you as an investor have to understand the risk that you're going to be taking on by either investing in VectoIQ before the merger or Nikola after the merger on June 2nd. A lot of questions to be asked. Personally, I think if Nikola can do everything they're talking about doing, it would be awesome to have those hydrogen stations all across the country, to actually build their factory. Didn't mention that yet. The factory is not yet built either. To actually build the factories, to build the hydrogen stations, to have a new fleet of what we'll call the future of trucking out on the market, in the United States, in Europe, all across the world. I think it would be a really awesome thing and a really commendable thing for Nikola to do, especially when it comes to protecting the environment, considering that there is no harmful emissions by these hydrogen trucks. I just don't know if they're the company that's going to be able to do it. They don't have that infrastructure put in place. I would say if Tesla was saying they were going to do this, despite Tesla not always fulfilling their promises, it's more likely just because they already have the infrastructure. We're talking about, as we said before, I'm going to say it one more time here before the end of this video, a super disruptive product with no disruptive infrastructure. Hope you enjoyed, guys. Remember to check the description down below for all this information. While you're down there, you will also see the link to join our email list where you'll get a free share in Robinhood as well as our free 8-page stock market ebook to give you everything you need to know to start asking the right questions when it comes to the stock market and analyzing assets. Also down there is a list of 16 ebooks to help you get started in your financial freedom journeys. Hope everyone enjoyed this week's episode of the GrowingAU Show, and we will see you next time.